Hey guys, we blame Jack Santaniello for this entire fun and frivolity because he had this idea, and we'll let him talk a little bit more about it. But anyway, welcome to the PPP webinar. We don't have a whole lot of great stuff to talk about, but again, just to remind you, use the Q&A to hit us up with questions. And I know that Jack actually has composed a song or, a mishmash of lyrics to go with today's PPP webinar. You can go ahead and hit us up in the chat if you have questions or just want to harass us, but use the Q&A. Oh gosh, we've already got Q&A popping up here. Where's your mask? Well, we're socially distanced and we've been in quarantine for a while. So thanks, David. Jack, can you hear us?
Yes.
Why don't you take it away?
All right. So in our discussions of the past couple of days, I was telling Gary that I just really have gotten tired of listening to, in the mornings, I'll switch from like WBT to NPR, and in the evenings switch from Fox News to CNN or MSNBC or MSDNC, as the people on Fox call it. And so it's like, I'm tired of it. And so I went to kind of like my fallback, which was 80s on 8. And I was listening to the music and I was thinking, gosh, I think people in the 80s really got it right. They just kind of knew, and they had a song and lyrics for everything. So I was thinking I would share with you some of my feelings about that. And kind of what I was hearing, and you probably have heard, we're hearing kind of the same things if you're just listening to the music. So of course, the whole graphic for today came about when I mentioned White Snake to Gary, and so the lyrics that go, "Here I go again on my own. Don't know where I'm going, but I sure know where I've been," including the pantry and the fridge over the several months at home.
Well, I don't know that, but I could play Still of the Night if you want.
Yes, you can play that in the background a little bit as I'm saying it. Hanging on the promises of yesterday, though I keep searching for an answer, I never seem to find what I'm looking for. Oh Lord, I pray you give me strength to carry on, because I know what it means to walk along the lonely streets of dreams. Don't stop believing, hold on to that feeling. Back in black, hit the sack. It's been too long, I'm glad to be back. Hopefully that's something that will happen in the near future. Gonna make you sweat, let the music take control, let the rhythm move you, just a squirrel trying to get a nut. What a feeling when I'm dancing on the ceiling, escaping reality. Something's going on that's not quite clear. Somebody turn on the lights, we're gonna have a party, it's starting tonight. Headed for a heartbreak. And then I've had a momentary diversion to the song She's Only 17. For those of you who don't know me, you're probably like, ew. For those of you who know me, know that I have a 17-year-old daughter. And so I'm that dad that's a step back when I'm walking with her and watching all the other guys' eyes, like where they're going. So there's that. Don't treat me bad, which actually, if it was grammatically correct, would be badly. Kyrie eleison, which for those of you who don't speak Latin means Lord have mercy. And actually it means Christ have mercy, I think. So down the road I must travel through the darkness of the night, and it reminds me of my days of being an altar boy, and I was kind of a little stressed because I was always worried about dropping the body and blood of Christ on the altar and being totally embarrassed. So money for nothing when you apply for PPP. That last part was added as I was listening to the music. Every single one of us is a back to life, back to reality. That's only after dancing on the ceiling. And then there was one that I heard actually this morning that is only a couple years old, but it's head above water. It's sort of a prayer and saying, please get me through this kind of thing. So now here's the thing, is that I have in my desk drawer a $20 Starbucks card. And there was one of the things that I said in there that is not from the 80s. And if you get that and you put it, first person to put it in the chat will get that card. And then if you know who the artist or artists who sang the song, you'll get a $5 bonus. So there's $20 to $25 up on the line if you can figure out of everything that I said. It's kind of like Big Brother when they give you something and then they quiz you many weeks later as to what you think you saw. So this is your opportunity to see if you were actually paying attention for the past few minutes. So
Yeah.
let's see what happens.
So what's not fair about that, Jack, is at least in Big Brother, you have the opportunity to know that a minimal comp is coming, and you're always aware. I was not aware, otherwise I would have nailed this. You got your $20 Starbucks gift card because my capacity for useless facts, of which that is one, is quite high. So good facts that I probably should know, quite low.
There was something in there that was very obvious that it was not. It was the where's Waldo? Like it was this one. What doesn't belong? And one thing doesn't belong in the other. So
before we jump into the substance, while we're still dealing with the fun and frivolity, Teresa has already weighed in on this one. She says it's head above water.
Okay, so I should have said that is true, and I will pay out because I wasn't clear in the instructions, but I did say it was one from a couple years ago, so I kind of cheated on her behalf. But prior to saying that, there is one that is actually in the prior century, but it's not in the same decade.
Okay, so wow,
That's hard.
So the lack of clarity is cost you $25, is what you're telling me.
It may have cost me 50, but yes, that's okay.
Okay. So Teresa, here's what I need you to do. I need you to send me an email to gfrey@trustbgw.com, and I will forward to Jack your email, but I need your address so that you can get a mailing of this Starbucks card or whatever it is that he's got there. So, man, this is already a fun day. This is like Halloween early. Go ahead, because we've already got some questions that have come in, but I know Adam's got something he wants to say too.
Yeah, so I think it's a repeat of last week, but it bears saying again because it's something that we've been dealing with for the last week or so, especially since there's been no stimulus that's really gone forward. Something I do believe that something will happen after the election because both sides do agree that something should happen. They just can't agree on the sides. They can't agree on the specifics. I think even if the Senate doesn't change hands and the presidency doesn't change hands, I think something will happen that will be directionally what they've been talking about anyway, which, for our purposes is going to be, probably another round of forgiveness, probably PPP like loans, probably some where if you have a provable revenue reduction, you'll get a second round. There'll probably be some form of employment, benefit enhancement that happens because it seems like everything else is all around stimulus for big industries and then also related to how much do we prop up state and local governments, testing, that kind of stuff, which is really important, but not germane to this webinar since we're really focused on what are the business elements associated with the stimulus package. So, all that said, people are at the point now where they need to start making decisions in terms of, based on their forecast for the future, do I keep the team intact? Do I not keep the team intact? So I'll just kind of rehash what we talked about last week, which is, and I appreciate Alan for bringing up the question. It was specific to construction, but this could apply to anybody. And that's really, the scenario is I spent the PPP funds. I have not received forgiveness. I haven't even applied for forgiveness. And I'm at the point now where I probably need to lay some people off. So my guidance on that is that, we don't really, we don't know ultimately what's going to happen once you submit the application and then, achieve forgiveness. And at the same time, the way that things stand now is that if you were in a position where in construction, this would be the case, you're in the position where when you did the average FTE count, you really didn't have any reductions because you were still working off your backlog. So average FTE count was looking good. You're on all cylinders. You spent the money, but you're going to have to lay some people off, which means that if you don't pick the right forgiveness period, then you're going to go ahead and, suffer some sort of consequence. I think if you're really faced with that predicament, you really ought to strongly consider submitting the application now, because I think the risk that you run is that if you delay, something may change. That's number one. If you delay and nothing changes, it's just not a great fact to have to go before the court. Again, I always use the court as a metaphor for, if I had to stand before a judge, would I feel comfortable saying this? I would not feel comfortable standing before the judge and saying, I was pretty confident that I was going to have to lay people off, but I didn't want to go ahead and submit my application because I wanted to move the income into the next tax year, because I thought that, something might happen there as well. Thus, I delayed my forgiveness, but I'd like to go ahead and pick a favorable period for my cover period. That, my cover period ended 4 months ago, but I didn't apply it today, but I laid, half my workforce off. That, although probably would meet the test, is not a set of facts that I'd want to operate under. So I think if you're faced with, hey, I'm going to have to do some headcount reductions, you're probably better off just biting the bullet and saying, I'm going to go ahead and submit the application now. They probably will fix the taxable income equation. If they don't fix it, you're just debating when you're going to have to pay the tax anyway, whether it's 2021 or 2022 for the associated tax year. So I probably would go ahead and bite the bullet, submit the application so that your cover period aligns with before your layoffs, and it also aligns with when you submit the application. That's just a good set of facts, because anything after that, you're saying it's unknown. I already submitted my application to put it behind me. Whereas if you wait, your set of facts are, I pretty much knew that I was going to get screwed and I was going to have to lay all these people off, but I waited anyway to go ahead and submit this application. That just doesn't sound, even though it's technically correct, it just doesn't sound good. If, on the other hand, you had an exception with the application, meaning you already had an average FTE problem where you're going to have to apply for an exception anyway, I don't see where, it's not like there's brownie points associated with, well, I only had, 5 people that I'm claiming exception for versus 20. I mean, whatever it is, it's still an exception. Like, there's not like, well, it was kind of an exception, therefore you pass, whereas it's really an exception, you don't. I mean, your exception is pretty binary. Either you're certifying that you were impacted by COVID or you're not, period. So if you're already making that case, whether if it was for 1 FTE or if it was for a dozen FTEs, I don't think that matters. So in other words, I would feel comfortable standing before the judge in that case. Thus, if I was already had a problem with the average FTE anyway, and I was going to have to apply for an exception, in that case, I probably would wait, because you're not benefiting from submitting now if you already had an exception.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, you guys ready for some questions?
Fired up.
All right, first one's from Scott. Good to see you here, Scott. If a borrower has exhausted their PPP funds before their 24-week payroll period, then will the borrower be penalized?
If a borrower has exhausted their PPP funds before the no, that's actually fine. You're not penalized for overshooting the mark on the payroll costs. So if you exhausted the fund in 8 weeks, if you exhausted the fund in 12 weeks, or if you exhausted the fund in 24 weeks, that's all fine.
All right, next one's from CJ. Do you have an Excel version of the actual SBA loan forgiveness application? The one I received from Gary was the Excel checklist.
Yeah, we can make sure that gets posted, because there is on the SBA's website. You got to go kind of digging for it, but on the SBA's website, there is the official SBA calculation spreadsheet. I mean, there's other templates that people have developed that are out there that, automate a couple things. We have our template that we've used internally, but honestly, it is helpful just to see what came from the horse's mouth, even if that's not the one you ultimately use, so we can make sure that gets posted out.
Yeah, and so what I'm going to do, CJ, is I'm going to send you a quick note back, but just email me, gfrey@trustbgw.com, and I'll do that. It may take us a while to get get it up on the new website. We just launched a new website, so go to trustbgw.com last week. So we're still trying to figure out how to self-administrate it. So Rachel's probably figured it out. I have not yet. So send that to gfry_1, all right, next question. Bob, if I barely qualify at 8 weeks and I can easily qualify for 24 weeks with payroll only, which should I do? If there's another round of PPP loans, will I be hurt because of choosing 8 versus 24 weeks?
I think this is one where probably Jack and I both ought to opine. So from my perspective, unless you were the first scenario that I just described, which is, you're going to have to do some massive reductions. And prior to that, you had zero exceptions, no exceptions. Then I don't see the benefit of going ahead and applying for forgiveness right now. So in your specific case, Bob, I just, I would wait, because to the point, you don't really know what's going to be in the next round to know if whether or not you've already been forgiven something is somehow going to complicate something. Like you could see as an example, like this is something that I could see them doing, because this is what the original intent of the CARES Act was with respect to PPP and EDL. You can see something that says, and by the way, if you already have an outstanding PPP application and a loan, you should go back to that bank, and we're just going to put the two balances together and operate under one new thing going forward, because that would be administratively simple.
Yeah.
Versus saying, one loan, then another loan. But maybe they won't. We don't really know. I just, I probably would go ahead and wait on that one, even though you've got 8 weeks, simply because you don't want to have a door shut simply because you went ahead and went through the process.
Jack, your thoughts?
Sure. So we've been talking about, and this question comes up periodically as to, should I do it? Should I not do it? And I think that, we've been pretty consistent in saying, well, on the one hand, if you've exhausted all of your funds and there's no potential additional benefit by waiting, like there's nothing, like if you didn't have to take any deducts, or you didn't have to use any waivers or safe harbors, then you might consider moving forward. There is that possibility that they somehow combine the two programs. The countervailing discussion point at this point, it being the end of October versus when we were discussing this previously, is that you now have a distance between when some applications were going in to be forgiveness applications. And I think that, to go and either combine or somehow give a credit or look back, I don't know. I feel a little bit differently that than I did previously, just because of the passage of time, that it seems like it would be it'd be harder administratively to deal with the ones that were not fully forgiven or had some issues with it. So, but it may be that they come up with a formula that says, all right, let's combine them together, and where you had some detriment on package 1, then we're going to give you some additional benefit on package 2 when you combine the two together. That way it's easier for the banks to administer the loans and the forgiveness and everything else, rather than having 2 loan packages per borrower. So I could see it going either way, but I just think as we continue to move further away from, and we're not going to hear anything anytime soon, and I can share with you some thoughts that have been shared with me as far as what has happened this week, meaning they're gone, they're done with doing anything in relation to this because of the elections, because of the confirmation and everything else. I mean, they left town, I think, on Monday after they were done with the confirmation, for the most part. So, it's really to be seen whether or not, we just don't know, unfortunately, still what's going to happen. But to answer the question is, if you're in the money and there's if you don't foresee any possible benefit in reconfiguration, now Adam did mention the reconfiguration. Does it somehow create a detriment? Like, do they take something away from you that you were in the money and now with the different terms of package number 2 and they integrate them to get the two together, is there some sort of detriment? So, there's that other point, which is, okay, if you're in the money now, maybe you should push forward and just in case. So that's a great way of saying we can't tell you which way to go, because it really just depends on where your gut feeling is on things that we can't control because it's in other people's control, and they're not going to deal with it for another several weeks, or at least another week, probably 2 weeks before they actually get back in the saddle on this issue.
Yeah, and that's hopefully we'll actually know who's president then. It depends. I do remember the hanging chads, and so you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I will. David, in classic David Adam format, I actually agree with you. All I'm saying is that, yes, you are technically correct. I'm simply saying that in the court of public opinion, it's a consideration to balance the risk that might look bad from the court of public opinion. And if I was going to have do something nefarious, if I'm the government associated with the court of public opinion related to FTE counts, I'm going to hit people that left their application window open, balanced against the risk of, hey, I maybe had to make a tax payment sooner than I otherwise would have had to make a tax payment. I mean, that's really what you're balancing. Yeah. Now, that kind of trade-off. So, I do agree that, in the scenario that I described with the construction contractor, the way things are written, it shouldn't frickin' matter when the person submits the application. I'm just simply saying that, look, if you had to bet your house on that'll be fine, I'm not quite sure I bet my house. I bet half my house. But I don't know if I bet the full house.
All right, next question. This is, have we heard whether the SBA is actually processing applications now? Have they really approved any forgiveness yet? News a couple weeks ago was that they had not yet started. So I'm going to just reference the most recent thing that I've got, which was a week ago from Vicky, and this was from Bank of America. And basically, Bank of America had, I think these points are worth reiterating. The client has up to 10 months after the covered period ends to apply. The lender has 60 days to review it. The SBA has 90 days to review it and make a decision and pay the lender. And so that's important. As of today, and that was a week ago, Bank of America was averaging 17 days to process forgiveness. The SBA is another story, though. To date, again, a week ago on the 20th, actually, the SBA had processed one business banking PPP forgiveness loan for the bank. So just a case in point. Hopefully that answers that question. Scott is back. Hey, have the SBA lenders determined an estimated time frame for processing the under $50,000 PPP loan forgiveness applications? Originally 60 days for the lender and 90 days for the SBA.
Yeah, I don't see that necessarily going any faster from a duration standpoint. I just see it being administratively less work, I think. So we haven't seen any additional guidance related to the below 50 grand other than the form that was released in terms of the bank saying, hey, and by the way, we can get you an answer in 5 days or less. I haven't seen anything from our end in terms of they've prioritized anything any differently. It's just less paperwork.
Have you seen anything differently on that, Jack?
I haven't, and actually, we've been doing this for so long, Adam is stalling without even having to say that. So I was on Google trying to find a recent article with statistics, because I like numbers, but I was not able to. But I have not heard anything differently as far as it's speeding up. And the real problem, I think, is, and if there's bankers on the phone that want to dispute or corroborate what I'm about to say, which is that it's natural for the banks not to want to go too far too fast until they have assurances that they are not going to be dinged for problems, and problems specifically that the borrower has made a fraudulent representation, a misrepresentation that the SBA or would say that, hey bank, this was such in bright lights highlighted. Any rookie banker would have been able to say, wait a minute, something's not right. And so we're going to hold you accountable for that. You were kind of deputized, at least at a minimal level, to vet this out and see if it's a problem or not. Now with the $150,000 or the $50,000 now, at least at this point, the theory is that, well, we're not holding you accountable just as administrative convenience. We're going to allow that to just go right through, and we're going to let you rely on the borrower's certifications that they did not lie, cheat, or steal, and that their numbers are accurate. And so until that is memorialized for loans that are higher than that, the banks, are I think the ones that are accepting them. I don't know if in reality those clocks have started, the 60-day clocks, because I have not seen those portals. It may be the case that they have kind of hedged their bets and said, well, you can send us your application, but it's not deemed an acceptance by the bank at this point. We're just going to put it in stasis and a holding pattern in forgiveness purgatory until we notify you that we are accepting your application, and then the 60 days starts, and then the SBA has the opportunity. So we just don't know all of that. And if anyone has any inside information as to whether or not that's true, I mean, that's speculation on my part, but I think it'd be foolish for a bank to accept a very high number loan amount and process the forgiveness if they're not given some get out of jail cards, or at least some waiver of liability for not taking a deep look into those forgiveness applications. So those are my thoughts.
And to that point, Jack, I mean, I feel like I'm peddling in conspiracy theories now, but I had lunch yesterday with one of our clients that is, he's not a banker, he's in banking consulting. And I'd heard this, from other bankers, many months past. I haven't heard it recently, mostly because I haven't asked the question. But this client, his sales are pretty much non-existent because he said that, banks aren't really buying a whole lot. And why are they not buying a whole lot? It's because, until they start to see some movement of funds, funds flowing back so they can take these loans off their book, like there's still somebody in the bank that has this conspiracy theory of, here we go again, we're going to get stuck with all this crap. Somehow, some way, because that's what always happens when something bad happens, is the banks are the bad guys and get stuck with something. So, I really now, how does that impact us? I mean, credit has significantly tightened up in the last 3 or 4 months, which I think is a combination of, despite banks having historically large balance sheets based on what they had to do from the buildup perspective with the Dodd-Frank bill and all the testing that they're doing now to make sure that they can survive a massive, fat tail event. So welcome to that. We're in one again. But I think they're all just kind of in this wait and see. Let's actually see the loans start to flow off our books. And you just heard from, I think Bank of America arguably had the highest volume and probably the most automated application forgiveness process. And they've got one, as of last week, one, they've actually received approval back from the SBA. So, it's like I always like to pick on bankers, and at the same time, man, I totally empathize with how they would be feeling right now in terms of, holy crap, you're right, it was a law, but laws can always be changed, and then we could fight this out in court. But in the meantime, what do I got? I got a bunch of non-performing loans on my books that are now impacting my capital ratios, and I also have to report to my regulators that then, like, you can see this whole train wreck happening, that I think if we just start to see some flow of things being forgiven, which I know that I'm giving contrary advice, wait for the application. But still, I mean, there are people out there that are applying and they're still not getting the official, hey, you've been green light, not because anything's bad. It's just, it's freaking bureaucracy. Shocker this would happen. But I do think that it's impacting other things downstream that we're all seeing.
Yeah, and this came in from David, and he's like, "Good point, Jack." So kudos.
I never get a good point.
I know, but you're
whatever. I get to strongly disagree with Jack. It's a good point. Whatever.
Well, but Jack is sending out Starbucks gift cards to people. You're debating them. So figure that. Most bank portals are not updated to reflect the new streamlined app process. So one real question is when and how your bank adjusts their portal to reflect the new streamlined app for loans less than 50,000. Good point. A couple more questions come in. I'm a CPA. Many of my clients have received too much PPP money from their bank, more than they actually qualified for. At the same time, I've seen some banks coming back to ask for additional loan documentation from borrowers. Yeah, I'd say we've seen some of that too, probably.
Yeah.
Not a lot.
Yeah, I think I don't know if we've had a case of receive more than you technically qualified for, unless it was really, really early on. And in that case, we saw that go both directions. And where that showed up is, the independent contractors, like a lot of them where the client asked for our help before they submit the application, we caught those. And it's like, look, I'm sorry that I have to tell you, but you could not include independent contractors. Was like an example of, if you're early on, a lot of banks had in their application process, independent contractors were included in the wage calculation, and then they came out with subsequent guidance around it. So we have had it both ways. I would think if in this specific case, if you're asking a question, if the client asked for more than they should have qualified for, I would hope that they actually spent the money and could make a case for a bona fide note at the end. Meaning like, again, I'm going before the judge. Look, man, I filled out the application wrong. It was early in the process, fog of war, yet I still met the intent. I still spent the money on payroll. I still spent the money on qualified purposes, blah, 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 versus fog of war, your mistake. I just bought a new fleet of trucks. Technically, B could happen, especially if it's below the $2 million threshold and they're not going to come looking. It's just, that's not the case that I'd want to go make. I either would pay the money back or I'd have a really good, I really would have met the substance of the use of the proceeds, and accepted the fact that I was going to get stuck with a note on the end, but I could still, meet the intent. The other thing too, that's another case for not asking for forgiveness, because it could be that, with this person, there's, stimulus number 2, maybe it gets addressed, or maybe, hey, I was overfunded here, underfunded here, all works out in the end. Who knows in that case?
Yeah. So there was a follow-on statement or actually questions for that. So if my clients get caught with this extra money, what do you suppose they will do, or should do probably? Make them pay it back immediately, allow them to pay it back as a loan, prosecute them? We're talking 6 and 7 figures.
Well, I think in that specific case, and Jack, you had something, so I'll pine here in a second, but in that specific case, let me start by saying, if that loan was obtained under fraudulent pretenses, you better give the damn money back. Meaning like you submitted a falsified payroll tax return, or what you put on the application did not agree to your 941, but your bank never asked for it. It was too stupid to pick it up. You better get that money back. But assuming that it was an honest error that was not done under fraudulent pretenses, I know that early on there was some talk of, hey, banks are going to call notes if you didn't spend the money because they don't want to carry the note. I don't see where that's statutorily available that they could even do that. Maybe they can, but it looks like, hey, the loan terms are the loan terms. That's dictated in law. So in this case, I would think they're going to get stuck with a note at the end for the amount that it is in excess of what they were due to receive, because the maximum amount of forgiveness is the note amount itself. So,
Jack?
So, Gary, you may want to consider finding a new co-host because Adam's going to jail. No, I'm kidding. Absolutely right. So it's get mentally prepared. So it's, it's one of those things I was thinking as you were saying, I don't know if this would ever happen to me and have the luck of it, but those movies that you see where the money falls out of the truck or out of the plane, and it's like, okay, well, people start scooping it up off the ground. Oh, it's found money, not my fault. It just happened to be there. So kind of an analogy to that is, this money, again, assuming, as you said, not fraudulently obtained. So not purposeful. And I would say not accidentally obtained, meaning that you, in good faith, put a number down and it was the wrong number, and that caused this money to come into your possession. And then you have kind of the next scenario, which is, you did everything right, but you ended up with this money. And that's kind of like, okay, kind of akin to finding the money on the street and saying, well, it doesn't belong to you and it's not finders keepers. I mean, that money belongs to someone. And if it can be identified as to who it belongs to, then shouldn't that person get it back? So that is, I think, what would happen is that you'd be required to give it back. Now, would they say, well, you got the money, so let's convert it into a note and have a kind of a more traditional loan, maybe on favorable terms, similar to, but I don't think it would be part of, or maybe it could be part of the PPP program. So if this issue is more prevalent than we know about, as it sounds like this particular person has several clients that have experienced this, is that if that has happened, then it is, okay, well, how do we deal with this administratively? But then you have people who, regardless of your political affiliation, are going to say, well, wait a minute. I mean, we've overfunded the program. We need to get that money back because it was never intended. So if the bucket was, $5 billion, we've actually distributed $6 billion. Well, we need that $1 billion back because that's like taking money from another program and letting it out through this program. Like now this other program is $1 billion short. So, there are a lot of considerations for that, but I would say that, in all circumstances, don't spend it. You may want to keep it separate and apart. And the assumption in this question and the response is that we're talking about the obtaining of the funds, not the forgiveness of the dollar amount, right? And so that the scenario is that there is money in your bank account that doesn't technically belong to you, that you didn't ask for, and you technically are not entitled to unless there's a modification to the arrangement with the bank and potentially under the PPP program or not. So there's various options, but yeah, I would, the worst position to take is, well, finders keepers, and hopefully I don't get caught.
That's why we have a lawyer on here.
I never said finders keepers, losers weepers at any point during this discussion.
So we've gone through the questions that have come in thus far. Making another round of calls to you guys. What else do you want to hit us up with?
While you're waiting, I can throw out some statistics as to, and some quotes, which are interesting. So there's this quote: failure to reach an accord carries human and economic as well as potential political costs. The U.S. is seeing record COVID-19 cases and the economy remains fragile. The realization that any new stimulus would almost certainly have to await the election contributed to the worst sell-off in U.S. stocks since early September on this past Monday, and futures tipped at a modest rebound on Tuesday. So there's some economic, and then here's some predictions on election scenarios. Victory for Joe Biden and a flip of the Senate to Democrats would clear the way for bigger scale stimulus, though they could also delay the vote in 2021 should Republicans resist. A split outcome could bring a variety of further complications, but in the interim, Republicans would have to find 13 from their Senate ranks to join Democrats to approve any deal. And that there was something else in here that I wanted to share that I lost it. But oh, it was the differential. We had talked about this huge gap between what the Republicans proposed and the Democrats proposed, and I thought I had the numbers up here, which, yeah, we're talking a lot of zeros in the differential, but it's not as big of a gap. So there's a lot of speculation, a lot of hopefulness that soon after the election, one way or another, regardless of the victor, regardless of the outcome of the Senate and House elections, that something will get done because it has to get done, and no more excuses. It's the confirmation is done, the election is done. Let's get to work. And even with the freshmen members of Congress, the new people of Congress. So let's get it going. So anyway, just sharing some stuff, buying some time for some more questions.
Yeah, any other questions out there? We still have more people than I would have imagined on here. So just a thank you to everybody that has joined us again. Hopefully, next week will be interesting. Well, the election will be 2 days behind us, and the question is will we know? Jack's going to give $100 gift. Not kidding. Hey, well, let's go back to that, because we do have a default winner of the $25 gift card that because the lack of clarity was there. But you want to reiterate what that was, so that
all right. So here's what I'll do. Is that was like probably 10 or 15 things. I'll give you the 5 of them, and obviously one of them is the incorrect one. So let's try to give you, obviously Here I Go is the easy one. So what a feeling when I'm dancing on the ceiling, escaping reality, something going on that's not quite clear. Somebody turn on the lights, we're going to have a party, it's starting tonight. Kyrie eleison, down the road I must travel through the darkness of the night. Money for nothing when you apply for PPP, look at them yo-yos. Gonna make you sweat, let the music take control, let the rhythm move you, just a squirrel trying to get a nut. Let's see, one more. I think that was 5, I'm gonna make it 6. Every single one of us is a devil inside, that's easy. Okay, so there you go. One of those 6 does not belong. Let's see if anybody can get it. So now you have what, a 20, 18, 17% chance of guessing correctly?
Man, we've got to have some audio files in here. And what were the decades that those came from?
It had to be the 90s, right?
All of those were from the 80s. One is from the 90s.
That's
barely.
Right.
Okay.
And think about the songs. One of them is obviously a different type of song with a faster beat than all of them.
So this is from Eric, Gonna Make You Sweat.
Yes, you got it. Now, who is the artist?
Oh,
you get that extra $5.
Who's the artist, Eric? Music Factor.
Music Factory, yes.
Right.
Now, here's the thing. It was published in December of 1990, so it's barely a 90s song by 11 months or so. Some think it was developed in 89, so it was kind of sort of a trick question. But yeah, so Eric, send your information to Gary, and I will keep my promise.
All right, guys.
All right, Eric. So I'm sending this to you right now, but it is gfry@trustbgw.com. So thanks for playing and for humoring us. I guess I needed to break out some of my wigs again. So thanks for letting me do that. Any other questions before we sign off? Hearing none. And if for anybody that we've offended with our wigs and fun and frivolity, it's Jack's fault, because he was the one that inspired us with this whole white snake thing. So
are you giving me a hard time for expressing my emotions? Is that
oh yeah, take us out, Eddie.
Yes.
I haven't played in a while. Never mind.
Oh, you got it. Keep going.
All right. We're adjourned. See y'all next week.